One for All, One Fo Oru, is the transferable quirk that is possessed by its ninth and current host, Izuku Midoriya. In the past, it was originally used by Yoichi Shigaraki, and later, its other previous hosts, two unnamed users, Hikage Shinomori, Dagoro Banjo, Nana Shimura, and Toshinori Yagi. Long ago, All for One, a man with a quirk that allows him to steal other people's quirks and transfer them to others, forced a quirk on his seemingly quirkless younger brother, Yoichi. This quirk allowed him to stockpile power within his body. However, unbeknownst to either one of them, Yoichi already had a quirk with no other power than that it could be transferred to another person. The transference quirk and the power stockpiling quirk merged to form One for All. After discovering this about his newly developed power, due to his strong sense of justice, Yoichi tried to defeat All for One, but given the huge difference in their strength, he failed. He decided to entrust the quirk to future generations of heroes, hoping that they would be able to cultivate One for All and one day put a stop to All for One. He passed it on to the second user, one of the heroes who had freed him from the prison cell where his brother was keeping him. All for One sought out One for All, and as a result, almost all of the users of One for All fought him and were killed by his hand, but not before they each had the chance to pass on the quirk to a successor so that it could reach the future and elude the villain. Assimilated quirks. The quirk factors of each of the previous users have merged with the core of One for All and have since increased in strength due to One for All's nature of stockpiling power. Izuku is the first user capable of accessing the quirks of the previous users. Because All for One would constantly hunt and steal the most powerful quirks, most of the users' quirks are rather unexceptional by themselves and do not have enough potential to be raised to ultimate move level. However, despite this, the second user has stated that the stockpiled energy of One for All has resulted in his meta ability evolving beyond anything it once was, and could be devastating if not used carefully. The quirks within One for All are: Unknown Meta Ability, the meta ability wielded by the second user. FA Gene, the quirk wielded by the third user. This quirk allows the user to build up and store kinetic energy as they move. This energy can then be released as an explosive burst of speed and power. Danger Sense, the quirk wielded by the fourth user, Hikage Shinomori. This quirk allows the user to detect nearby threats. Black Whip, the quirk wielded by the fifth user, Dagoro Banjo. This quirk allows the user to produce tendrils of dark energy which are useful for long-range grappling and increasing the user's mobility. Smokescreen, the quirk wielded by the sixth user, N. This quirk allows the user to generate thick clouds of smoke from their body, which can obscure people's vision. Float, the quirk wielded by the seventh user, Nana Shimura. This quirk allows the user to levitate. Known users and usages. One for All has been bestowed to 9 different hosts in total, starting with Yuichi Shigaraki, the younger brother of All for One. Alongside the quirk, its origins and the story between the two brothers have been passed on. Because One for All can only be transferred willingly, each wielder has some form of personal connection with their corresponding predecessor and successor. Every host was entrusted, not only with the quirk, but also with the duty of using it to stop the evil of All for One. All of the previous users of One for All are aware of Izuku being the 9th holder of the quirk. When All Might was researching the previous users of One for All, he was unable to find any information on the second and third users due to the multifaceted nature of One for All and the era back then. Yoichi Shigaraki. The first user of One for All. Yoichi Shigaraki was a man of average height, but was very sick and malnourished throughout his life. He has white hair, like his older brother, that went down to his shoulders, making him resemble his future adoptive nephew, Tomura Shigaraki. He also had bright green eyes of similar shade to the future 9th wielder, Izuku Midoriya. Yoichi was the younger brother of the powerful villain, All for One. He was initially believed to not have a quirk, but in reality, he had a quirk with no other power than that it could be transferred to another person. One for All was formed from the fusion of his given quirk and the power stockpiling quirk All for One had forced upon him. Though small and sickly, Yoichi had a strong sense of justice and did not back down from opposing his brother's evil deeds. The younger brother attempted to defeat his older brother with his newly merged quirk, but didn't have a sufficient level of power to do so. He then passed One for All down to his successor, in the hopes that someone in the future would eventually stop his evil older brother once and for all, a cycle that continued to the present day. Even long after his death, Yoichi is aware of Izuku being the 9th wielder of One for All, due to his consciousness being embedded into the quirk, and showed Izuku the events leading to the creation of the quirk. Second user. The second user of One for All. He is a man with short, spiky hair, a large scar across the front of his face, and wears a combat jacket with a large black collar. He is also equipped with a pair of gauntlets on his arms which he seemingly uses to attack. He was supposedly the leader of a resistance movement that fought against All for One's New World Order during the peak of his power. He did everything he could to fight back, including taking the lives of anyone who stood in their way. He initially had plans to kill Yoichi due to his ties to All for One, before having a change of heart and choosing to save him instead, inadvertently allowing One for All to grow in the first place. He initially refused to accept Izuku as a successor to the quirk, due to his optimistic desires, but is eventually convinced by Yoichi. After Izuku tried to use his meta ability for the first time, he reminds the young hero about using his meta ability as a last resort since the power of One for All has changed the meta ability beyond what it once was and can be devastating if not used carefully. His proficiency with One for All is unknown, as is his given meta ability. Third user. The third user of One for All. He is a man with hair tied up in a spiky ponytail, with a black bandana covering his forehead, as well as also wearing a combat jacket with a pair of small escape tubes coming out his shoulders. He was part of the resistance fighting against All for One alongside the second user. He was there during the assassination attempt on Yoichi before deciding to rescue him instead. Just like the second user, he also initially refused to accept Izuku as a successor to the quirk, before coming around to it thanks to Yoichi. His proficiency with One for All is unknown, though he likely used it in conjunction with his given quirk, FA gene. Hikage Shinomori. The fourth user of One for All. He has a crack on his face near his left eye, running from across his left eye to his left lower lip. This damage came from the strain that One for All put on his body after wielding it for so long. He also seems to have light-colored hair. Unlike the other users, Hikage chose not to confront All for One, aware of the enormous gap in power between them, and instead spent his time in seclusion, training himself and strengthening One for All for his successor. During the final years of his life, his body started to break down, causing scars. Hikage passed One for All on to Dagoro before dying at the age of 40. In All Might's notes about the previous One for All users, he scribbled out Hikage's cause of death. It was revealed that All Might scribbled out the cause of death due to suspicions he had about One for All's side effects, and thanks to this, the users learned the truth that anyone who wields One for All and already possesses a quirk will have their lifespan shortened due to the burden of power on the body. Hikage's proficiency with One for All is unknown, though he likely used it in conjunction with his given quirk, Danger Sense. Until this record was succeeded by Toshinori, Hikage wielded One for All the longest, having wielded it for a total of 18 years. Dagoro Banjo. The fifth user of One for All. Dagoro was formerly known as the pro-hero, Lariat. Described as being super funky. His proficiency with One for All is unknown, though he likely used it in conjunction with his given quirk, Black Whip. All for One attempted to steal One for All from Dagoro in the past, but failed. He gave in One for All by giving him some of his blood in the battle with All for One. N. The sixth user of One for All. N was a man with dark hair who wore a high-collared jacket, and is fairly quiet due to his attire obscuring his mouth, and that his predecessor, Dagoro, introduced him to Izuku. Little is known about N's proficiency with One for All, other than he was not capable of bringing down All for One and the fact that All for One attempted to steal One for All from him in the past, but failed. He likely used One for All in conjunction with his given quirk, Smokescreen. He gave Nana One for All by giving her some of his hair in a battle with All for One. Nana Shimura. Nana was a very compassionate and noble individual. She is regarded as having been a truly great and exceptional hero by incredibly powerful heroes, such as All Might and Gran Torino. Little is known about Nana's proficiency with One for All, other than she was not capable of bringing down All for One. Nana gave One for All to Toshinori sometime prior to her battle with All for One that resulted in her death. She likely used One for All in conjunction with her given quirk, Float. Toshinori Yagi. The eighth user of One for All, and the first user who was born quirkless. Toshinori has wielded One for All longer than any other user, for a total of 40 years, while almost all the other users were either killed by All for One or died of old age due to the burden of One for All. The reason Toshinori was able to hold one for all for so long is revealed to be because he was born quirkless, meaning he could bear the burden of the quirk since he was an empty vessel one for all could fill. Toshinori, better known as the pro hero, All Might, is probably the best known user of the quirk, if not one of the most talented. Gran Torino once stated that Toshinori did not take long to adapt to one for all, having been blessed with an extremely resilient body, despite being born quirkless. He was able to control and focus his power on any extremity he chose without recoil. Izuku Midoriya, the 9th user of One for All, and the 2nd user who was born quirkless. Initially, Izuku had very little control over the quirk and could only use One for All at 100% power, grievously injuring his own body each time, and only in short bursts at that. While this allowed him to unleash incredible displays of strength, it came at potentially lifelong physical costs, resulting in him currently having a visibly scarred, permanently crooked right hand and arm. This is because the training Izuka did prior to receiving the quirk was only the bare minimum needed for using One for All without his limbs being blown off completely.
If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.